We continue our coverage tonight of Michigan's high car insurance rates. Last week, we told you about a study by Lending Tree that looked at how much drivers pay in each state.
It says Michigan drivers pay the highest rates by far, with the average rate of around $3,800 a year. Florida has the second highest rates, but their average is around $1,200 less than what we pay.
And this comes almost 4 years after Michigan reformed its no-fault auto insurance laws, which promised to lower rates. The law also cut the amount of money set aside for victims of catastrophic crashes, leaving many of them without proper care. Joining us live tonight to discuss this is Douglas Heller, Director of Insurance at the Consumer Federation of America. Thanks for joining us today, Doug.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
So let's start with that state law I just mentioned. How exactly was it supposed to lower rates, and how would you say that's playing out now?
You know, it was supposed to be an overhaul, but in a lot of ways it was just an undercutting of the system in Michigan. The no-fault system for years provided everybody with this unlimited protection in case there was a tragic and catastrophic accident or crash. And what was done in 2019 was said a couple of things. One, people could get rid of their unlimited no-fault protection and go to a lesser coverage, these sort of more bare bones coverages, and that was supposed to create savings. And also, and quite dramatically, it really undercut the prices that insurance companies had to pay for the caregivers of people who were severely injured. And so those combination of things were promised to be the solution that everybody in Michigan was waiting for and hoping for. But in fact, we're seeing not only are rates still the highest in Michigan around the country, they went up by over $1 billion, almost $1.5 billion just last year alone for Michigan drivers. And that's because when the legislature and the governor went to change the system in the auto insurance market, they went after consumers, after the people who care for consumers when they're injured, but they did not go after the problem, which is the way the insurance companies slice and dice the market for their own interests. And typically, that has meant that Detroiters pay the most of anywhere in the country, and that was never made to change. And we still see it, and that's why when you see the Michigan market prices and how dramatically high they are compared to the rest of the country, you ain't seen nothing if you aren't looking specifically at Detroit, where it's even worse. Because remember, that's a statewide average. But for Detroiters, the pain is so severe, and that continues to this day, obviously.
Yeah, that is very unfortunate. And with this law in place to safeguard drivers, and we're still seeing these high numbers, what does this mean for drivers? What can they do?
Well, I mean, so there are a couple of things. We all always should be shopping around, because even though prices are spiking right now, and when I say spiking, everybody has seen their bills, especially if they're getting a renewal, they're seeing 10, 15% premium hikes. Shopping around right now, it's not going to get you to lower than your premium had been, but you may be able to find a better price than your company is offering. So we always recommend that. We also want you to talk to your insurance company, make sure they're charging you for the right amount of miles, especially people whose work changed after the pandemic and maybe they are hybrid and staying home a little bit more. Make sure you're not being billed as though you're driving 12 or 14,000 miles a year if you're staying at home 2 days a week. But beyond that, we really can't do it alone. We need the politicians and the regulators at the Department of Insurance and Financial Services to step in for, on our behalf for once. They've been protecting the insurance companies for years. And when they put together that bill in 2019, really under the cover of night, they did it at the behest of the insurance companies, following the lead of the insurance companies. And so really, it's time for the politicians to turn around and say, wait a second, our job is to protect the drivers on the road. Because what I'm really concerned about is that we're going to see a spike in uninsured motorists. And Detroit has always had a problem with people not able to afford the insurance, so they go bare, they go without that coverage. That's terrible for them and their families, but also for anybody they might crash into as well, and the taxpayers who have to pick up the tab. So I'm really concerned about higher rates of uninsured motorists if the politicians don't step in, and if the insurance companies are allowed to continue to gouge us, throughout the state.
So if it's time for lawmakers, politicians to step in, from what you've seen, is there an appetite for that on either side of the aisle?
Well, I will say that, I mean, as somebody who's been paying attention to the Michigan market for a long time, I have heard from lawmakers this year who said, what can we do? Because this isn't acceptable. And I'm really hopeful that there will be a real effort to make sure, one, that insurance companies can't use the same kind of practices that they always use, that always got Detroiters stuck with the highest bill. I mean, one of the things that we're looking to make sure is they stop insurance companies from basing our premiums mostly on the credit score we have. You know, if you have a low credit score but a perfect driving record, you may be paying more for your auto insurance than somebody who has excellent credit but was convicted of drunk driving, because the insurance companies like high credit people as customers, even if they're not good drivers. So we're asking the legislature to take on things like the credit score. Stop allowing the companies to price at these really small geographic territories where, depending on which block in Detroit you live, you may pay, you know, $500 or you may pay $1,500 for your coverage. That's not even, you know, that's a 6-month policy. All year, we're talking about $3,000, $4,000. So we've asked that. We've asked the lawmakers to think about making sure that when people do get in a crash, that there are providers who are getting paid enough so that they can actually stay in the business and provide the care that people need when they are catastrophically injured with brain injuries or severe damage to their backs and bodies. And so we need to see these improvements, and it's time for the politicians to stop being afraid of the insurance companies. That's what I saw when back in 2019 I was asked to testify on the issues that were before the legislature. I saw them all cowering to the insurance industry, and I don't know why that is, other than the fact that the insurance companies are big lobbyists, big political players, but consumers have to come first. And there needs to be a change in Lansing if that's going to be the case, if we're going to try to see some relief in the markets.
I want to zero in on Detroit specifically. Do I have this correct that Detroit drivers are paying the second highest rate after only New York City? Is that right?
Well, it's kind of subjective. The data that I've seen has Detroit as the highest. There's a pocket of Queens in New York where we do see really high rates that compete with Detroit. But depending on, you know, it doesn't really matter. At this point, we're talking about the worst case, you know, in the country, and Detroit is always there, 1 or 2. And it's a history of this. The other places, and I'll be honest, the other places that we see really extremely high rates, Baltimore and New Orleans. So one of the things that I've noticed in my research over the years is that Detroit, Baltimore, New Orleans, 3 cities that are really extremely important communities of Black culture, have also been communities that have had huge auto insurance rates. And that's not a coincidence, right? There's a legacy of redlining and housing that connects with this, of unfair treatment in terms of the way road conditions are kept up. And so Detroit has been bearing the brunt of the legacy of discrimination in all sorts of ways, but in car insurance, it is so acute. And that's one of the reasons I think that the legislature has to be more thoughtful about how they go about reforming the insurance industry, because you can't kind of ignore this long history that makes places like Detroit, parts of New York, Baltimore, and New Orleans the highest prices in the country.
Yeah. Pretty ironic and problematic that we're having this problem in the Motor City.
Yeah.
Douglas Heller, thank you for joining us.
Yeah, thank you.